Cool. So, as you can see, when as a patient advocate, when you see stories like this, you know, it's kind of hard to deny that this is medicine. And you have to forgive me here. I'm going to have to get back. Here we go. So, you know, when you think of cannabis, you know, the stereotypes are the brain dead stoners, people who can't function, their memory's terrible. But one of the interesting things that we've discovered over the past several years, based on the research that's coming out, is that cannabis actually works really well for Alzheimer's disease. And there's actually a link between the endocannabinoid system and deficiencies and Alzheimer's. There's a protein that causes plaque to develop in the brain of Alzheimer's patients that causes atrophy in the brain. And what we're finding is that cannabis resolves this complication with Alzheimer's, and it actually helps with some of the atrophy issues related to Alzheimer's disease. And with PTSD, we have at least 22 vets a day kill themselves in the United States. And PTSD is one of the biggest contributing factors to that. And one of the big problems with vets and PTSD is the VA, when they come back, they actually have something called the comeback cocktail with the VA. And they put these men and women who come back and get diagnosed with PTSD on numerous medications. I have a few friends that I'm honored to know in the state of Colorado that are cannabis refugees. One friend, Matt Kill, who was on up to 20 medications a day. His liver was shutting down, his kidneys were shutting down, he was unable to function on these medications. Now he's gotten to Colorado, he's gotten off all the pharmaceuticals that he was on, and he's been able to treat his PTSD and his traumatic brain injury exclusively with the use of cannabis. This is Larry. Larry's a retired police officer who has Parkinson's disease. And the difference between what you see with Parkinson's patients and how they suffer with traditional pharmaceuticals, which aren't effective in terms of some of the conditions that you're dealing with in terms of Parkinson's and tardive dyskinesia. This is a pretty dramatic difference that you'll see with Larry in terms of the transformation before and after cannabis. And if I can get this to come up here.
Hi, Larry. How are you? Come in. Come in. Good to see you. How you feeling? It's been a good or rough week, really. And the best way to take it is put it under your tongue and rub it in your cheek. Don't do too much, you're going to be asleep all afternoon. You know what you should do? No, don't try to communicate, just relax. See what happens.
We know from animal experiments that the endogenous cannabinoid system is very important in regulating motor activity, the very type of activity that is impaired in Parkinson's disease. From animal experiments, we also know that boosting certain branches of the endocannabinoid system is helpful in relieving symptoms of Parkinson's. Finally, from anecdotal information, we know that certain patients who smoke marijuana experience relief of their symptoms.
I think you're calm now. So quickly. Isn't that amazing?
He used just a single drop, and his hands afterwards were rock steady, and the dyskinesia left.
It was so bad. It works most of the time. It's Did you guys eat lunch? I'm younger now. Actually, I
First, like, I really use marijuana. It makes me pretty angry that I can't get it in my home state.
The number one frustration that I have is knowing that there is this untapped potential comes from what marijuana is teaching us to generate new medicines and being stuck because of financial issues or political issues. That is extremely frustrating.
We now know that medical marijuana controls dyskinesia, and yet it's not available to us.
So we know with certain neurological disorders that cannabis is helpful. And what we found in research that is emerging on this issue is that in cases of stroke and traumatic brain injury, cannabis actually works as a neuroprotectant. And there have been studies that have shown if you can get cannabis to stroke patients immediately after the event, that it can significantly deter some of the damage that results from stroke. And the great irony is that the United States government has a patent on cannabis as a neuroprotectant. Patent 6630507. So we see the disconnect here. The United States government has a patent on cannabis, showing that it has medical benefits as a neuroprotectant, yet we still see cannabis listed as Schedule I, which says that it has no medicinal value. So we can see the disconnect here as far as our policies are concerned with this plan. So why does cannabis work so well for so many conditions? Well, we all have an endocannabinoid system. Every mammal on this planet has an endocannabinoid system. We are literally hardwired for cannabis. There are two types of receptors in the body, CB1 and CB2. CB1 is predominantly in the brain and the nervous system. CB2 is found in the organs, mainly that are responsible for immune function. And we produce our own endogenous cannabinoids that bind to these receptors in our brain and nervous system and organs in our body. The predominant ones being anandamide and 2-AG. So basically, the cannabinoids in cannabis, they function like our endogenous cannabinoids. They bind to these receptors. These are all the conditions that we know so far. That's a short list, I would say. I think it's a longer list, but these are some of the conditions that we've seen have been helped with the use of cannabis. This is some of the cannabinoids that are present in cannabis. In legal states, they test around 7 cannabinoids, some of the predominant cannabinoids. We all know, we're probably familiar with CBD or cannabidiol. There are, up to now, so far, they have discovered over 140 cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. And we all wonder why can't you overdose on cannabis? There have been no reported deaths in the history of the world when it comes to cannabis. Well, the reason being is we talked about our CB1 and CB2 receptors. There are no endocannabinoid receptors in the brainstem, and that's where all your autonomic functioning is, your breathing, your heart rate, all the things that keep you alive without you thinking about them are located in your brainstem, and we don't have any cannabinoid receptors in that part of our brain. So. And the other thing about cannabis, we talk about the criticisms specific to cannabis, and some people argue, well, we already have a prescription, a cannabis prescription. We have Marinol. This is one of the arguments that lawmakers make on a regular basis when it comes to disregarding or dismissing this idea that we need to legalize whole plant cannabis. Well, the thing is with Marinol is it's a synthetic form of THC. And one of the problems with it is that it's not, you don't have any of the other cannabinoids, and you don't have the entourage effect with Marinol, and as a result, you have a high level of psychoactivity with Marinol. You get really, really messed up and high on Marinol, and you also don't have the benefit of the synergistic effect of all the other cannabinoids that are present in whole plant cannabis. And we talk about synthetic cannabinoids. This is another synthetic cannabinoid, spice. We've had a significant increase in deaths as a result of spice. This is not cannabis. This is a synthetic cannabinoid, and it's dangerous and it's deadly. And these synthetic cannabinoids aren't only found on street drugs. We had a study in France just recently where a patient died as a result of this study that they were doing on synthetic cannabinoids. They simply aren't safe in comparison to whole plant cannabis. As many of you may know who follow this issue, cannabis was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia from 1854 until 1941. 1942 it was officially removed. Cannabis use, the history of cannabis goes back about 10,000 years. People have been using this for a long time, and obviously it wasn't outlawed in the United States until recently. So this is an Egyptian hieroglyph of a Egyptian god, Shishat, with a hemp plant. So why is cannabis illegal? Harry Anslinger. He was at the forefront of cannabis prohibition. And the interesting thing is about Harry is that he didn't really have a problem with cannabis until he became the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in 1930. And after he became the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the timing was interesting because alcohol prohibition was ending. And he was looking at his budget shrinking under this new ending of alcohol prohibition. And so he decided to go after cannabis. And he did that in a couple of different ways, but he obviously demonized it. But a lot of his arguments were on racial lines. And what we'll find in terms of the war on drugs and cannabis is that the war on drugs has been used to politically and economically marginalize minorities in this country. And this was kind of the start of it. He used demonization of immigrants and people of color to go after cannabis. And there's a really interesting book that gives a really good story on this called The First and Last Days of the Drug War. And it talks about how Harry Anslinger executed the drug war. I highly recommend that book. This is some of the propaganda that was used to end cannabis as an available plant. And here's another interesting thing about this. So when alcohol prohibition began, you saw a significant spike in violence towards police officers. So more American police officers died during prohibition of alcohol than any other time in history. 300 died in 1930. That was the beginning of Harry Anslinger's reign at the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. So after prohibition ended, as it says here, police deaths didn't reach 200 a year again until Nixon. And you can see in the stats here, you can see where the spike starts, where alcohol prohibition started, and you can see the spike where Nixon launched his war on drugs. There's Nixon with an interesting package. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that Nixon went after cannabis, and one of the things he did is he enacted the Schaefer Commission. He was hoping that the Schaefer Commission would come out and say that cannabis was horrible, it was a danger to society, and that it should be illegal, and we should have harsh enforcement when it comes to this issue. Well, the Schaefer Commission, their report concluded the opposite. And they basically said that neither marijuana user nor the drug itself can be said to constitute a danger to public safety. So we know this, and it's not the first time that we've had reports like this. And this goes back to Nixon's aide talking about the drug war and how they targeted minorities. This study in 1939 by New York Mayor LaGuardia, he commissioned this thorough study of cannabis, and like all the other research, the report found that it did not cause crime and it did not lead to the use of hard drugs or addiction. Once again, these studies confirming that cannabis does not pose a risk to public health and public safety. Again, this is another chart showing the rise in police deaths that coincided with prohibition of alcohol and Nixon's war on drugs. And you know, when we think about law enforcement and the position that we put them in with regards to this issue, we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. Do we really want the resources of law enforcement going towards kicking in the doors of people that use this plant? Especially when we have over half of the country now that has access to medical cannabis, in 8 states that have legal recreational cannabis. And one of the things is that what we found is the enforcement of prohibition is actually deadlier than the plant itself. We've had 0 deaths from cannabis use, yet people have died. There were 85 deadly SWAT raids since 2010. And so prohibition is literally deadlier than cannabis. So we have to look at this and say, as far as public policy goes, can we really justify the enforcement of these laws? And again, we look here at the annual deaths in the United States. You can look at heart disease, cancer, tobacco-related deaths, alcohol-related deaths, drug overdose, gun-related. And obviously, right now, we're dealing with an epidemic in terms of the opioid crisis, particularly here in Tennessee. It's very, very severe. And what we're finding in legal medical cannabis states, in states that have fully implemented medical cannabis programs, they're seeing on average a 25% reduction in prescription painkiller overdose deaths. So we're seeing significant reductions in those states. And I want to go back really quick to you know, enforcing these laws and jailing people. You know, we look at the incarceration rates in the United States. We have about 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's prisoners. So, and the drug war is largely contributing to these numbers. And the thing is, when you get arrested for cannabis, it affects your ability to get employment. It affects your ability to get financial aid. It affects your ability to get housing. It can be incredibly devastating to have a marijuana arrest on your record. Just a little a little cartoon about alcohol and cannabis, the difference. There was a study recently done that showed that they did a comparative analysis of drugs, and it found that cannabis is actually 114 times safer than alcohol. So we're looking at a choice here in terms of patients, and obviously in Tennessee we don't have access to medical cannabis yet. We hope that changes soon. But you know, when you look at patients, you know, having to make a decision here between toxic pharmaceuticals, and we've seen this before and afters. I talk to patients, as a patient advocate, I talk to patients on a regular basis, and I hear the horror stories of what people have gone through in terms of dealing with their diseases with traditional pharmaceuticals. And, you know, they're making a choice. And in states with legal cannabis, people are literally getting their lives back when they're able to get off these dangerous pharmaceuticals and they're able to get on this natural plant. And many have found that marijuana is literally an exit drug. People with opioid addiction, people who are on, you know, numerous medications for their conditions. This is a quote from Dale Villanueva, you know, testifying that cannabis helped stop using alcohol, prescription painkillers, and hard street drugs to manage his PTSD. And that's one of the interesting things about cannabis, because, you know, we talk a lot about people using cannabis recreationally, or people using it that have certain disorders. What we're finding is a lot of patients self-medicate. people with mental disorders, particularly with schizophrenia. We find that patients self-medicate with cannabis because it works. This is Colton Turner. Colton went to Colorado in a wheelchair. He has Crohn's disease, and he was literally wasting away before his parents' eyes. And they packed up their house and they moved to Colorado. And this is Colton now. This is the form of cannabis that he takes. He takes it in capsule form. And he is literally hiking mountains now in Colorado because of cannabis. This is Amy. Amy got in a devastating car wreck and was put on numerous prescription medications, one of them being opioids. And you can see the dramatic difference between where she was with pharmaceuticals and where she is today with cannabis. And as you can see, other patients, are getting their lives back with this plant. And we really want the opportunity for patients to have access to this medication here. You can look at the dramatic difference between traditional pharmaceuticals and cannabis, particularly when it comes to cancer. Chemo and radiation are incredibly devastating to your bodies. And it's very difficult to recover. You're not only recovering from the cancer, you're recovering from the chemotherapy and the radiation treatment. So we have a choice. The great thing about cannabis is that it touches on so many different issues, and that's one of the things that I really love about this plant and why I'm so passionate about this issue. Because not only does it have to do with our health, it has to do with social justice, it has to do with our environment. We have hemp growers in the back of the room. I encourage you to meet them if you get a chance later on. They're selling hemp-derived products in the back. And luckily we do have hemp, and you can get high CBD hemp products in the state of Tennessee now. And I would encourage you, if you don't, if you live in this state, to try some of the CBD products because they are helpful for some conditions. What we're finding with seizure patients is they only go so far. A lot of patients that we know in legal states, they will start on CBD only, and what they'll find is that they have to go to a solution with some amount of THC higher than the 0.3% that we're allowed in the state for hemp-derived products. So what can you do? One of the things you can do is keep in touch with your legislators. And one of the things I want you to do right now is I want you to get out your phones and I want you to take a picture of the screen. Cory Booker just introduced the Marijuana Justice Act at the federal level. And one of the problems we have is our Senator Bob Corker insists that cannabis needs to remain on Schedule 1. We strongly disagree with him, and we would encourage you to let him know that you strongly disagree with him as well. Senator Lamar Alexander is actually a little more sympathetic to the issue. It's interesting, when he was governor, they actually had a small cannabis program here in the state of Tennessee. It didn't last very long. But he was there for that. So I encourage you to contact your lawmakers at the federal level, contact your lawmakers at the state level. Follow these organizations on social media. We have numerous advocacy organizations throughout the state. A lot of them are doing really good work. Safe Access Tennessee has been doing a lot of great work. They had a really unfortunate situation happen where they had an advocacy event that they were supposed to be doing at Sounds Stadium, and the Sounds folks got cold feet, and they told them that they were no longer invited, and they couldn't present their information at that event, which is really unfortunate. So we want to promote their organization because they do a lot of good work, and Tennessee Normal as well. With that, I'm going to bring up Chris Ford with Ford Strategy. He is one of the lobbyists working on the medical cannabis legislation in the state of Tennessee, and we're going to have a little bit of Q&A on this issue.
So I do better with a mic on a stand, and I'm from East Tennessee, so I like to tell people that I talk fast and think slow. But it may be a little bit of both tonight, and I want to move us along pretty quick. So if you all were my clients, I would start this conversation with saying, do you want the bad news first or the good news first? Okay, the bad news is we're not quite there yet with the number of votes that we need. And what I want to tell you is the good news is we have a bill, and that is an extraordinarily viable bill that we can pass in Tennessee. Okay, and that is a medical bill. So Cecily just had you take a picture of a screen, and here I need you all to do something else. First of all, by show of hands, how many people like me are Tennesseans that actually live here? Okay. So how many of you know who your state representative is? And don't tell me it's Cooper, and don't tell me it's Marsha Blackburn, who your state representative is. Okay. How many of you know who your state senator is? And don't tell me it's Corker, and don't tell me it's Alexander. Okay. So I need you to go, there's a website, it's Capitol with an O, capitol.tn.gov. That's where you can look up your state legislator. The bill that we have that will affect us as Tennesseans is in the Tennessee legislature right over here on Capitol Hill. And I was a government major and spent 13 years in academia, so I don't want to be doing Professor Ford, but it's easy to get for people to misinterpret or the confluence of what is a state issue and what's a federal issue, and we're not going to do all that tonight. Most of you can probably explain that better than I can. But we have a bill that we can pass in the state of Tennessee for medical cannabis. One of the things we need you to do, though, is be in touch with your legislator, and I want to give you a few quick tips about that. The first of which is that please, please, please be extraordinarily polite. I know in dealing with politicians, it can be very difficult, and people working around this issue are extremely passionate. I have a very difficult medical history myself that includes a couple of conditions that were on that slide. I understand why this is important. I also worked on the original CBD oil and negotiated with my client, who at the time was the American Academy of Pediatrics, who opposed the CBD oil bill to come up with a compromise that allowed us to pass a CBD oil bill. And we got there because we were sensible, we were polite, and we respected one another. If you are going to call your legislator and say, hey, jackass, you need to pass this, please do me a favor and look up capital.alabama.gov. Please do not do that here in Tennessee. And there's a number I want you to keep in mind, and that number is 133. Is there anybody in the room that can tell me why that's significant? Matt Walczyk, are you still out there? Yes. Why is 133 significant? That is how many votes we need to get the bill passed. We need 132 legislators, and then we need our governor, Bill Haslam, to sign whatever bill we pass. Okay, I'm not going to give you specific numbers, but I can tell you right now, it's a pretty small number, a small universe, as we call it in politics, right now that we need to influence. Our legislators understand this to be about three different things, three separate questions. The first question is, can we do this? Can we pass a bill in Tennessee? And the fact of the matter is that we know we can do this because other states have done it. Yes! The second thing is, what do we need to do, right? And that gets a little more complicated, a little more complex. Please don't minimize the complexity of this issue, because I will tell you, this is among the heaviest lifts and extraordinarily complex issues to deal with, because you're setting up regulatory systems. Other states have tried this. We're getting in, sort of somewhat on the back end, somewhat in the middle. So things have tried, things have failed, and our legislators are looking at that. So the first thing is, can we do it? The second thing is, what should we do? The third question is, who should we do it for? Okay, and then the mechanism with which we can alter the prior three. So can we do it? What should we do? And who should we do it for? The polling, and I'm not allowed to share with you the poll numbers, but I will tell you they're extraordinarily, I like that word, extraordinary, overwhelming. They are overwhelmingly in favor of medical cannabis. Yes. Overwhelming. They're not even close to a 50-50 split. The poll numbers I have seen, and the reason we're not telling you tonight is because we're going to release those polls at a time when it's advantageous to release them. But we use conservative polling firms, And even those conservative polling firms, even the most conservative people, the Trumpers, let's say, people who might have been in Charlottesville, Virginia yesterday, even among those folks, it is still way over 60% of people supporting medical cannabis, okay? So even among your most conservative folks, they're in every district in Tennessee, that's where we're at. So that's pretty much our good news. And our bad news together is you have the poll numbers that you need. You have the information that you need. The bad news is we don't have much time. So we are going to next month, and pretty soon, they were supposed to release it this week, but I knew they weren't going to. Your governor and your lieutenant governor, who's the Speaker of the Senate, and your Speaker of the House negotiated with us this past winter to name a task force. And the task force is going to examine medical cannabis. Just medical cannabis, not recreational, not decriminalization. We're going to just deal with medical cannabis. They are ready to announce who is going to be on the task force. And then the task force is going to meet, we think, 3 times. They promised us at least 3 times. We requested that it meet in 3 separate parts of the state in each of the 3 grand divisions, East, Middle, and West. So what we understand right now is we're going to start probably in Middle Tennessee, right here in Nashville, with the first meeting. They, according to the law, when they name this task force, then they have a set number of days they have to give for public notice. So they have the chairs lined up, they have tentative dates lined up, and then at that point they will name the committee members, and they will have, at that time, I have a feeling, at the first meeting they will name the dates for the other 2. The best thing that you can do in the meanwhile is politely encourage your friends to politely contact their legislators and say, hi, I'm Chris Ford, I live in your district, I have multiple sclerosis, and I have an untreatable form of, or a treatment-resistant form of post-traumatic stress disorder. I've attached the following report, and I understand you're interested in this issue. Please be direct. Please tell them you live in their district and let them know why you're interested. Hi, my name is Cecily. My grandmother died of pancreatic cancer, and in her final days, we had to go out and look for cannabis for her because that was the only thing that gave her a quality of life in her dying days. Be quick, be direct. I'm going to tell you right now, long treatises that you send in emails get dumped. They do not read them. Okay, you've got about 5 or 6 sentences and the opportunity to meet with them. So make the opportunity what you can. If you give them too much information, they don't have time to digest it. And this is going to come as a shock to you. They have staff that read their email through them and sort it out. So please be direct. I support medical cannabis. And then the bill is, we don't have a bill number for you here tonight, but it's, say Senator Dickerson and Representative Fason's bill. All of the organizations that were listed up here, by the way, will have the bill numbers and have some talking points, but I can't emphasize to you enough how incredibly important respect is. Because while you can beat a legislator up and think you can pass this bill, I'm standing here willing to tell you that just one of you pissing just one person off and disrespecting them could absolutely kill this bill. That is how close the margin is. So, you can disrespect a legislator and he can say, I have absolutely you've given me no incentive to vote with you. So
send them cookies with a nice note instead.
Yeah, well, just tell them the truth. Yeah, well, send them cookies. Just tell them the truth instead. So we're getting kind of late. What I wanted to do, though, is I do this generally with clients. We're going to take a couple of minutes and just do kind of question and answer. It's not often you get to spend time with a lobbyist, and you should thank God for that. But if you want to ask a couple of questions, if I can answer them, I'll answer them. If I can't, I'll just have to tell you I can't.
I don't have a question, but I moved back to Tennessee from 3 years in Colorado.
Okay.
I have multiple medical issues, including cancer. I had 3 doctors in Colorado say, you need medical marijuana. And I did it, and thank God. And so whatever we need to do to pass it in Tennessee, we need to do.
Agreed. Do you know who your state representative is? Do you know who your state senator is?
She just moved back.
Still find out.
Find out. We're out of time. We really are. I mean, we've got to do that. So how about before I walk out of here tonight, why don't we figure out who that is?
Yes.
Because it's a story like that can be persuasive.
That's very.
I'm not beyond shaming you, by the way.
Oh, that's okay. I need it.
Yeah, no, I want to help you. Who else has got a question? Sir.
So, piggyback on the medical marijuana bill,
Okay.
how far after that would a conservative effort estimate be for recreation?
You know, I'm from 10 generations of Tennesseans, and I'm an extraordinarily progressive person myself, and I understand all those other issues. And I would say I think anybody that gives you an estimate like that right now is talking out of the back end of a mule. I don't think there's no way to handicap that. There's just not. I know because of the bill we have right now. I think I would be lying to you if I said I think it's 7 years down the road. There's too many external factors that. And I think the federal government is the external factor that we're going to see. It's the same. I used to do a lot of civil rights work around same-sex marriage, and it was sort of the same thing. I said the external pressure from the federal government will be ultimately what pushes us in Tennessee.
Right, but there is no actual monetary incentive for same-sex marriage.
No, there wasn't.
But to improve Davidson County schools and the amount of money that would actually come into this state through recreation.
Absolutely. The question. I'm just make sure I answered your question. The question was how long do I think it is, and I can't handicap it.
So how do they argue against attaching? Look at Colorado, look at Washington, look at every other.
Well, there's lots of ways they can argue against it financially and other things. I think our legislators truly believe, and I work with them every day, by and large, they believe they're representatives of their districts and the citizens of Tennessee. They try to listen. They try to see what they believe. And let's be fair to our legislators. They've come a long way on medical cannabis, CBD oil, and we've been there several years. I am proud to be a Tennessean, and I think that we're best served to continue to believe in them and believe that we will do something. But I'm not going to handicap it.
Once cannabis prohibition does enter the South, it's probably going to end like alcohol prohibition did, where it's going to be county by county. It's not going to be a statewide thing. And we still have dry counties for alcohol in the state of Tennessee. So.
Who else? I saw somebody else. Sir.
Yeah, well, first of all, Cecily and Chris, I want to thank you for being here and for putting on this event. I think we're all really appreciative of that because we've been.
How big a problem is Jeff Sessions? What can we do about it?
Hang on one second. He's got a question, and let me answer his question first. But thank you.
We're not looking for political spree here.
Go ahead.
I wanted to thank you because we've been missing the leadership that now seems to be in place to bring interested people together and coalesce our efforts together in a way. And so with the data that you just got through announcing about the polling, legislators are probably being made familiar with those numbers as well too.
Sure.
Or will be.
Correct.
Chris, what do you see as being the major hang-up to prevent or to stop or to slow this whole process down since so many other states have moved forward and Tennessee hasn't?
Well, I think the question was, what do we see as the major hang-up with all the other states having done this? And so I'll answer it, I think, in this regard. We first have to believe we can do it. Okay, and part of us believing we can do it is believing that the public will was there to do it. And I think they've underestimated just how strong the public will was for decriminalization.
Right.
And so one of the barriers we have now is that we have to do this now because we don't know who the next governor is going to be. And we do know there's at least one gubernatorial candidate who, over her dead body, would never let this pass. And the sanctions and the punishment for passing it, if she were to be elected, the theory is that it would be difficult to pass that with her.
Yes. Do not vote for Diane Black.
Well, I'm not.
She can't say that. I can't.
I won't say that. That's not my business.
You're saying that the will of the people is really a major thing that they're becoming aware of?
They're becoming aware that the will of the people, and that's the biggest issue. And then we have some small things. You have to deal with the law enforcement piece and their understanding. You have to deal with the medical community and their understanding. By and large, they're willing to work. The medical community especially said, let's flesh this out and let's look at the science, okay? You have to be willing then to work with the political aspects of us, which there are many. Yeah. Some are spoken, some are unspoken. It's an extraordinarily complex issue. I think everybody in the state agrees we're right to do this. This is why politics sucks. We all know this is the right thing to do, but everybody gets their ideas, their hands in the cookie jar and their theories, and one of the best things we can do is let everybody screw that up to the point where we don't pass a bill, right? So I think that's where we're there. But I'm gonna have to sometimes take another question.
One more question,
and I think
it was about Sessions, Jeff Sessions.
How big a problem is Jeff Sessions as far as the whole country and the states individually? What can we do about it?
I'll answer it backwards. I don't think you can do anything about the Attorney General. I think the Attorney General is going to take care of himself. People keep asking me, and this is Chris Ford giving you an opinion. What if he starts to prosecute people? Okay, and I'm a student. In my academic background, I was a student of the Civil Rights Movement, and I had Cornell West for class. If y'all anybody know Cornell? And one of the questions I had, I was the only white person in the class. He called me Brother Ford, and he wasn't calling me Whitey. And one of the things I learned from that study and from him, and this was what struck me the most, was in retrospect, we look at Birmingham, Alabama, right, in the 1960s when they turned fire hoses on the children who were students who were protesting, the African-American children. And the whole country was horrified. So if Sessions, in my opinion, if Sessions wants to go do a couple prosecutions somewhere, what he's going to really find out is that there aren't too many people on his side on this particular issue. So while I would feel badly for the people who have to defend that, I'm not really that worried about Jeff Sessions because I think Jeff Sessions and even the president know that the public will on this is to, particularly for medical cannabis, is for the decriminalization. I am not worried about Attorney General Sessions. I think he's puffing up quite a bit. I think that's probably all we're going to hear.
I think that's all we've got to change up the stage. Raylan Nelson is coming on next. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, yeah. I am.